The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and does not represent legal or accounting advice or counsel and should not be seen as such. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only, a conversation. We make no promises or assertions on how this information will impact your business, your personal life, or financial well-being. The information relayed does not imply endorsement or offer opposition to any specific organization, product, or services. Welcome to Shift. I'm your host, Lori Power, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by two very passionate practitioners. Trudy and Robert are going to talk today about succession planning. They're going to talk about the family enterprise. We're going to talk about getting out of our own way. And before we delve into this dynamic conversation, I'm going to get them each to introduce themselves for those who may or may not know them from previous broadcasts. Trudy, let's start with you.
Well, thank you, Lori. Great to be with both you and Robert. My name is Trudy Pelletier. My company is the Family Stewardship Group. I have been working with private family enterprise for 16 years in the areas of succession and transition. And most of my work starts in the family system. So I help families deal with the emotional nature of succession and transition planning and helping them talk through tough issues so that they can get down to the having clarity in what the future looks like.
Thank you, Lori, and good to see you again, Trudy. My name is Rob Welke, and I am with a company called Mexit Inc. We are value accelerator professionals. We actually help businesses get ready for sale by increasing the value of the business, building systems, processes, and people within the system to make sure that company is sustainable and successful in order for them to be able to sell.
Now, we're clear on what we do when it comes to succession planning. And for those who may or may not know, my opportunity within that succession conversation is how do we manage the communication points and successfully transition employees, the talent in the organization, from one owner into the next. We're very clear about how we do that. We're clear about how we can work with our clients to the best fulfillment for their goals. However, getting in the door is sometimes the painful part for us. Once we're in there, the work starts, but that's where there is work and there is traction and we move forward. Trudy, I want to start by asking you what stands in the way?
Very emotional journey. And at the core of succession and transition are, is the complexities of human beings, which is emotionally based. And, many owners don't even want to begin to look and do that heavy lifting. And I call it, like in my work, I call it like all there is to do is to be looking in the mirror. And it can be the hardest work that people do. So my experience is, people hope it's going to get better if there's difficult issues, and hope is a killer of action. And the worry, the brain predicting that if we bring an advisor in, things will get worse. The brain never predicts a good story.
We talk about entrepreneurs being risk takers, and because they're so used to taking on the risk, Trudy, very often is that not the barrier to bringing somebody in to help them mitigate those risks?
Well, it is. So one, they've been mostly independent, responsible for all the risk that they have taken. And so when we as advisors, and I certainly, still catch myself as I'm unraveling what this risk factor is, because they think I can handle the risk. So again, no need to take action. And so a new piece of work that I'm trained in talks about utilizing the entrepreneur skills. There's 5 skills that had them be successful, and one of them is risk taking. So remove that conversation and have them utilize the other 4 skills to actually do the succession planning, and that being their biggest challenge ever.
What are those 4 skills that outside of risk taking?
So innovation. I mean, Rob, how many times have you been in a company and the plan is to, be building value for exit, and then the owner sort of wants to go down the rabbit hole of, oh, well, let's create a new product or let's innovate. So innovation can be a real derailer of succession. Rob, is that true for you? And have you seen that?
Most assuredly. One of the things as a result of the work we do is we find that the business owner has more time to think, because a big part of what we do is building the team to support the business and the succession of that business once that owner has moved on to whatever that might be. When an owner has too much time on his hands, he tends to come up with new ideas that can derail. And I have a great story about one of our owners that, he made the company, the members of the company, the leadership team of the company responsible for all the actions and decisions going forward, and then brought to them an actual new idea. And they ended up saying to him, sorry, boss, you can't do that. You need our approval first. And that was like, whoa, what the heck just hit me? So they're not used to, first of all, they're not used to being told no. And secondly, they don't usually have time to come up with new ideas. So when they do have free time, like you said, innovation is a big driver of their success. So that's what happens. They come up with even more ideas to be successful.
Rob, you're actually pointing to another, category in that skill set is the owner's need for achievement and the owner's need for control. And, planning of any kind raises the certainty of uncertainty in life. And that's part of what has people turn away from planning, never mind the succession or the exit planning, because there's a whole world of ambiguity and uncertainty, and that triggers people at a very deep psychological and emotional level. And I'm sure you see that all the time, Rob.
In fact, it's a good thing. It's funny you mentioned that, because in reality, that is a big challenge, because business owners typically don't plan. They don't know how to plan. They've never been taught how to plan effectively. So they don't know how to measure success in that plan. And one of the things that we find is when we come in, they have no structured discipline around anything in their business other than gut instinct. And they've done very well with it in many cases, right? But putting a plan in place requires them to stop, think, and then act according to a set of principles and disciplines. And for that, many of them, that's uncomfortable because nobody has held them to account. And in fact, the only people that typically hold a business owner to account are their spouses and their family, because nobody in the business is going to tell a business owner, boss, you can't do that. And, unless they've got a really good relationship with that individual. So you're right, planning is difficult and they don't like doing it because they're uncomfortable with it because they don't understand how to drive results in many cases.
They don't like to take the time to make the time, right? And it brings to mind what we're talking about here is either love it to leave it well for the new owner, or love it to innovate it, which is one of those core principles. And sometimes we can have people that start this succession plan where they think they're burned out and they think that they're no longer interested in their business. So they feel they want to leave it. They start this planning. Robbie must see this. They start this planning and they learn to love it again. They learn to take it down that new road. And that planning can then serve two arms, really. It can serve that one, when it does come time for them to sell, they've now got additional value in the company. But two, now they're moving forward in the right direction because they have that plan.
That's right. I mean, and again, part of the plan thing and the process of planning is you have to set an objective. And a lot of people, that idea of an objective down the road or a goal is very nebulous. They're not really sure what to think of it or how to formulate it. And I'm sure, Trudy, when in your work, you find they don't know where to start, right? Because they don't know where to end, quite frankly.
Yes. And then there's the assumptions and the conclusions. Like I'm working with a family right now, and the plan is succession. And the patriarch is saying, and I can see that the business may not be the same business 2 years down the road. And he's really taking his hands off. And that's unusual for, an owner to say, listen, it's no longer mine. And, my children or my successors, do with it what you will. And that need for control, and it needs to look like the same way it did 5 years ago. I mean, that's not the world we live in today.
There's trust in being able to do that.
That's what I was just going to bring up, was one of the challenges a business owner hasn't empowered, in many cases, they haven't empowered their team to be successful without them. And that is probably one of the most difficult things to get a business owner to do, is to say, okay, I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to give you my ideas. I'm going to let you do this. But once they do that, and the people that in their team actually start to not just become empowered, but act empowered, all of a sudden it's a different business. It's all going in the same direction, but the business owner now look and say, oh my gosh, these people do know what they're doing, and I can trust them with this decision.
Yeah, they experience their people as effective and productive, and that frees up a whole bunch of energy and actually really adds to the strength and sustainability of the business and
Well,
therefore
and
the family.
agreed. And I think the other thing, what it does is it releases anxiety, because one of the problems a business owner has is they're anxious about giving power to somebody else because they're not sure if they're going to be able to do it well. And in many business owners' cases, they've had bad experience. They've given people the opportunity and those people have failed them. So they're really anxious about releasing that and empowering people because they're not sure what the result's going to be, or they've had bad experience with the result. And I think a part of that, again, gets back to they've got no formal exposure to good disciplines and processes to help them drive the success of their business. It's mostly been organic for a lot of these people. And I mean, one particular company we work with, they had huge organic growth, to $18 million a year. But it was just that, it was organic growth. There was no structure, no control around it. And now that we've helped them facilitate some of that control, they've essentially doubled the size of their business in a year. And it's because they now have disciplines and processes, and they trust each other. And that's the big thing. They trust each other, and they know they can rely on each other in the business. So, to Lori's point about getting the transition of the people to the new owner, this is a company where whoever buys that company is going to go, holy crap, did I ever get a great team? Because they trust each other, they like each other, they respect each other, and they drive towards common results.
I would add to that they also then have the capacity to talk through the tough issues, because when they're not dealing with the difficult things, like someone not delivering what they said they were going to deliver, when that skill set isn't alive in a team, it's not a healthy team.
I'm going to put a pin into one of those things because I want to drill down a bit deeper on that, Robert. But before we get to that, Trudy, we've talked about the control, we've talked about the risk, we've talked about the innovation. What are the other two items that are essential to the entrepreneur and still need to be considered when we're talking about that succession plan?
I think I said the need for achievement. The need for achievement and the need for control are two of those skill sets that we would define, and also an owner's tolerance for ambiguity. So, again, part of their history plays out when when the business is reliant on them and they're responsible for success. That's easy stuff. It's delegating it and sharing it. And as Rob said, trusting and like building people's skill sets so that they can be accomplished themselves.
I think that brings us to the wildly important goal, right? The WIG. And knowing that entrepreneurs as well are competitive. It's part of the nature. It's part of pulling all of those 5 things together means that they have a competitive nature. If we're going to build what we do, then to build into that competitive nature is to see them that they can make those markers clearly toward that goal. And I think both of you had said at the very beginning, they have to know what the end is in mind and be able to revisit and understand where they are in the journey in order to get there.
And I would add to that that's both for the business and for that human being, right? For that business owner. What's my new purpose? How am I going to reinvent myself? How am I going to show up in the world, and where will I continue to contribute and make a difference? And it's a both and scenario.
Yeah, it's not an either or. It is a consistent, both have to be working on a parallel track. One of the things that we have found is business owners will never leave their business if they don't have a place to go to, right? Because they don't like the idea of the word exit to start with, right? It's to them, exit is an ending. And these guys don't like endings, right? They like the next challenge. So what is the next challenge in their life is really what we have to help them find. And, understanding those 5 things that Trudy brought up is really critically important, engaging whether or not they're ready for that even.
And as
Yeah.
we know, all three of us in this room, is transitioning doesn't necessarily mean that I'm heading into the sunset into a retirement. It could be that I'm just simply exiting that business in order to start and transition into a new business because my expertise has grown. I have honed a lot of skills and now I'm ready for that next big adventure, that next entrepreneurship. And this time around, I'm going to take these learnings, but I'm going to apply these innovations.
And I like that because it's what is the next adventure of their life? Because that adventure doesn't have to necessarily be a business. It could be the adventure of being a grandparent, the adventure of travel, spending time with family, the adventure of helping, doing something philanthropic, because that's a big one for some business owners, is the philanthropy. What can I do next to help out my community, my church, my social groups that I support in order for me to have a belief in myself, a belief of worth in myself going forward? Because yes, their business is their life and it defines them, but they can find a different definition if they seek it, and we can help them seek that.
It's not seeking, it's actually creating it. And it's asking
Fair?
those questions that have them look and, like, I would say, like, really, what brings meaning to my life? And then where can I express that? It's all
Yeah,
created.
It all comes
agreed.
down to the family, Trudy. It always comes back to the family. Because whether somebody considers themselves a family enterprise or not,
Correct.
there's a family behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, I say every business is a family business because one, you have, you come from a family, you may have your own family, and then sometimes business owners create a culture of family. It's part of how they cultivate that loyalty in the business. So that experience of family, caring for each other. I mean, that's inherent in effective leadership is, demonstrating how much we care for people so that people will be inspired and will be a yes to, shoulder to shoulder accountability and a culture of like really making a difference and being successful. What would you add to that, Rob?
Well, I was thinking, as you said, family, and one of the things that I like, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and Brene Brown and a few of these other contemporary writers. And if you don't, nobody cares what you do until they understand why you do it. And for many business owners, the why really is that sense of family. I'm here to protect these people that are mine. This is my tribe, and I want to protect them. And that's a big driving force in every decision they make.
Often a risk in a family succession and transition is that the matriarch and patriarch have very different pictures of what that next chapter, that next adventure looks like. And unless the two of them are having some conversation, and if the relationship is somewhat unstable, that too can be a barrier for an owner to be, making decisions and doing the planning.
And that's a good point because we don't know generally what's going on behind the scenes when we're working with a business owner until we get deeply involved in that personal plan piece. So they might not have a desire to exit at all for different reasons than we could even try and nail, right? So it gets back to we need to truly understand what they want before we could figure out what we can do to help them.
And people can get stopped at, here's what I don't want. And it's harder to articulate what it is that we do want because most of us, are far more familiar with what we don't want.
And that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
You see yourself in that, Rob?
Nope. I do know what I want.
Awesome. That means you've done that, that hard work. And I
Well,
think as advisors, the go first attitude really makes a difference.
well,
Like in my business, there's 3 success factors for a family transition. I've done all those 3 things so that I can tell my family clients I've gone first.
yeah. Well, it's ironic that you say that because this particular stage of my life is my next stage of life, right? It is that I used to be a business owner, right? I had 35, 40 employees at one point. I'm not interested in doing that anymore. I'm interested in helping people who are there now build a better company so they have options at the end of the day. And that really is really all about what we do in our particular practices is create more options for the business owner. Because in many cases, business owners don't have options, or they've only got one or two, or they don't even know what their options are. And that's a challenge for many of them because they don't even know what the next stage of life could even look like because they've never even talked about what are the options available to them to begin with.
And you're bringing that experience to the table, Rob. You're bringing that experience as a business owner, just like Trudy says, you've been there and you're understanding where they are and you're building that trust and that rapport and that empathy. And to the point about understanding your why, I think when it comes to succession planning and looking at what is next in your life, it isn't so much as I think it's been well beaten into us as entrepreneurs. Know your why, know your why. And so while I may know my why and I know my value proposition, it's how I do it. Get back to the process, get back to the structure, because that at the end of the day is what's saleable. When I was speaking to a client this morning, I came up with, on the fly, when you're trying to come up with, so you understand there's a difference between process and structure, and they do need to coexist together. And in the end, what I said to the client is, we're not cooking a meal in the bathroom. Okay. We're not cooking the meal in the bathroom. And when we're entertaining, we're not entertaining in the bedroom. We're entertaining in the dining room or on the patio, right? And so the structure is the house. The process is what you're doing in each room. They all have doors and they all interact, and we live in this house, but they are different. And I think that was a bit of a breakthrough for me in working with this client, is to help them understand that, yes, you have a lot of processes, but we're lacking the structure. Or you have a structure, but nobody knows where they're going, and you have a lot of people ending up in the bathroom looking for their lunch, right? So I think these things are really important to understand, is not just your why you're doing what you're doing, but how you're doing it, and can other people do it as well? Because if other people can't do it, they're not going to buy it.
I like the analogy, quite frankly, but interestingly enough, one of the comments that I've got that I think is a lot of business owners out there today, particularly the demographic that's looking to sell in the next 5 to 10 years, they don't know their why. They've never stopped to think about it because these are drivers. These are people that came up with the baby boomer. They had to fight hard. They had to scratch and save and do everything they could to build that business. They never stopped to think about their why in many cases. All they did was they just kept building. So they need to take that pause. They need to have that reflective capability, and they need to be provided that room or that space to be able to do that in the right framework. Because many cases, they go on vacation. They're not thinking about their why. They're thinking about their vacation, right? They need to they need to be given the opportunity to have that conversation and create the space for that conversation to evolve.
Well, and one of the things that this new tool that I'm working with points to is that, and it speaks exactly to what you said, Rob, business owners don't slow down to deal with, maybe some skeletons in the closet. Succession and exit planning involves looking at the strengths and weaknesses of themselves as a business owner, as a business leader, and the business itself. And that's very confronting because they've been going so fast, driving so hard, that part of what has to happen is like slowing down and opening up some of those closet doors and dealing with where that business owner was less effective or maybe made a poor decision, and that can be a really confronting process. And so not just having the space, having the right advisor to, be asking those questions and balance that, the human brain judgment of good, bad, right, wrong, I like this, I don't like this. It's like it can all be neutral. And we tend to not, operate that way.
No, we always bring our biases into the conversation, right? And those biases are formed by our life experiences. So it's really difficult to unbias a person if they've had those life experiences, especially if they've had really tough experiences.
And,
Well,
when you were talking about the structure and the processes and the house analogy, it reminded me of a conversation I was in last week. Family says, oh, it's just personalities. Actually, no, it's not personalities that are causing, the challenge. It's the inability to talk through the difficult issues, and it's low listening levels that are playing out that, you've assigned reasons. The reasons my kids don't get along is because we're all such different personalities. It's like, well, welcome to the world. And there's still conversations that need to be had and planning that has to happen.
Absolutely.
and I'm looking forward to delving into these a little bit more, these blocks. I'm going to call these barriers to success. One final word from each of you. What I want you to consider is the one takeaway. Somebody listening today, somebody who's going to say, okay, what's my one block that I'm going to work on? And taking it from each of your perspectives, what's that one block that you would challenge a business owner to look at in preparation for our next conversation?
My bias is communication can resolve anything. The problem is most people stop talking. So, my encouragement would be that business owner to say, what is it that I am avoiding? And naming it. And because once it's named, it can create some relief that then gives, some power to be able to take action. It's the not naming it that often paralyzes people and has them do nothing.
I think it's one of the things that Trudy brought up was it's not so much seeking what their future looks like beyond work, but it's helping them to create that based on their skills, their strengths, and even their weaknesses, quite frankly. It really gets back to they have to create that future for themselves before they can do anything with their business.
Well, that's why it's succession. It's success. It's not stop.
Correct.
That's right.
It's succession. This has been a brilliant conversation, and I'm so pleased to know the both of you. Until next time, thank you so much for joining in.
Oh,
Thank you,
for
Lori. Great
having
to
us.
be together.